Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, May 4th. Today is day 211. I was grateful yesterday to be in Springfield, Massachusetts. Today I'm in Boston. Yesterday I was with the Eastern Diocese of the Armenian Orthodox Church, and last night I was able to share with their assembly some of our work at Churches for Middle East Peace, seeking to protect the Armenian quarter in the Old City of Jerusalem, and the work we've done around Nagorno-Karabakh. I reminded the people who were gathered there to remember the Palestinians and who share a similar history of displacement with those of the Armenian people and a similar history of ethnic cleansing. The Washington Post issued an article just in the last couple of days about the devastating effect of the destruction of agriculture and the agricultural sector in Gaza as a result of more than 6 months of bombardment there. Before October, most of Gaza's fruits and vegetables were imported into the enclave, but Gaza's ability to be able to feed itself at all has been limited for nearly 20 years because of its punishing blockade by Israel and by Egypt. That was put into place after Hamas was put into power in 2007. Israel controlled all but one of the crossings because of limited electricity and water supplies, because of barred access to deeper fishing waters offshore and restricted abilities to be able to import and export goods. As a result, agricultural and fishing were often small scale but essential aspects of Gazan life. Gazans farmed and fished where they could, building greenhouses on rooftops, harvesting rainwater for irrigation, jury-rigging boats to be able to run on cooking oil or car engines. Small olive groves and fruit trees dotted the landscape. Local produce from Gaza included tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, herbs, red and green chili peppers. They would go to markets or directly to kitchen tables. Households relied on local production for more than 40% of their fruits and vegetables as of 2022. Agricultural accounted for nearly half of Gaza's total land area before October 7th, according to the United Nations. 45% of that land that was used for agriculture has now been damaged, and losses in the north of Gaza can be as high as more than 70%. So I wanted to share just how damaged the agricultural aspect of Gaza has been. I thought that was significant for us to understand. In terms of what's happening right now in relationship to a ceasefire deal, the United States has told Qatar to evict Hamas's political leaders if the militant group is going to obstruct an Israeli deal for a Gaza ceasefire, and if it's going to obstruct a deal for hostage release. So Secretary of State Blinken delivered this message to Qatar's Prime Minister, Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani last month, according to a U.S. official. Diplomats familiar with the situation said that the Gulf Emirate, which has hosted Hamas's political leaders for years at the United States request, has anticipated that this request was coming. Qatar has advised the Hamas leaders that they should come up with a backup plan. Blinken, the U.S., Israel, and the West have placed the blame squarely on Hamas for the reasons that there is no hostage deal. But Hamas has been clear. They've said that there will be no hostages released until there is an end to the war, until it is guaranteed that Israel will stop bombarding Gaza and that the Israeli government agrees that they are no longer going to continue a ground invasion and the war on Gaza. They will not release hostages. Blinken has said, Netanyahu has said that the war on Gaza will not be brought to an end until Hamas is defeated militarily. Israel will attack Rafah with or without a deal, according to Netanyahu. So that's what we're working against. An attack on Rafah is going to happen no matter what, according to Netanyahu. That means more death, more killing, and it could be a tipping point towards a more broader regional war. In terms of the hostage ceasefire conversation, the Saudi Al-Sharq news outlet reported that in coming hours, Hamas will announce if it's accepting Egypt's proposal. Hamas reportedly said that it received a promise for a ceasefire and a full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza in a third phase of the deal, and a promise that the IDF forces would not continue fighting after the hostage release. According to a Saudi paper, Israel would agree to also release Marwan Barghouti from an Israeli jail to go to Gaza as a part of the deal. A senior Israeli official said that a delegation of Israeli officials will head to Egypt's capital if Hamas agrees to the current proposal for a hostage deal. and an Israeli official said that the information on Hamas's final position has not yet arrived. But in light of past experience, even if Hamas is said to be following the outline, the small details and reservations it will present could still dissolve the deal. So this is all kind of down to the wire. Minister Gantz in Israel called on the Israeli decision makers to refrain from off-the-record briefings, to refrain from hysteria, but to wait for an official response and updates. And Hamas has not yet given its official answer. If Hamas accepts the deal, the war cabinet will meet to discuss it. The Washington Post has reported that the U.S. told Qatar, what I just shared, that Hamas's leadership should be expelled from Doha if they resist a ceasefire deal. An official familiar with the matter said Qatar could close Hamas's political office as a part of this broader review. They could also end their role as a mediator in the Israel-Hamas war. If Qatar is not going to be mediating, they won't see a point in keeping the political office. So that might be a part of this reassessment. A second official said that contrary to reports, Israel is determined to enter Rafah, no matter what the circumstances are. That's what I was sharing previously. In Gaza, the executive director of the UN World Food Program said that based on what her organization has seen and experienced on the ground, North Gaza is in a full-blown famine. U.S. Central Command announced that it has temporarily paused offshore assembly of the floating pier in the vicinity of Gaza because of the sea state considerations. And the Washington Post published what it reports is footage filmed by a Palestinian journalist prior to an Israeli strike in which 2 journalists were killed and 2 others were wounded. The video shows no IDF troops or military equipment in the area, but the Post says that it raises critical questions about why journalists were targeted. According to the health ministry in Gaza, at least 34,654 Palestinians have been killed and 77,908 have been wounded since October 7th. The Israeli Foreign Ministry said that it will contact international forums about sanctioning Turkey for violating export agreements because it has halted its trade with Israel. We've been talking about that for the past several days. Protests against the government and in support of a deal to release the hostages are scheduled across Israel Saturday evening. That's tonight. President Joe Biden issued a statement ahead of Holocaust Remembrance Day, speaking out against the alarming surge in anti-Semitism at home and abroad, and pushing back against attempts to ignore, deny, distort, and revise the history of Nazi atrocities during the Holocaust, or Hamas's murders and other atrocities committed on October 7th, end quote. 86 Democratic lawmakers, listen to this, told President Biden that they believe there is sufficient evidence to show that Israel has violated U.S. law by restricting humanitarian aid flows into Gaza. We expect the administration to ensure Israel's compliance with existing U.S. law and to take all conceivable steps to prevent further humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, they have said. Politico reported that Israel has presented a plan to the U.S. and aid organizations on evacuating civilians to Rafah, but according to the White House, they said they have not seen a detailed, extensive plan. According to Al Monitor, the U.S. State Department has notified Congress that 4 units of the IDF have committed serious human rights violations. We've been talking about this. Those 4 units have been named. A 5th unit, the Yehuda Battalion, is still also under review. This is that whole idea of whether or not the Lehi law will be applied to Israel. You may recall that we've talked previously about how a few of those battalions, it's been said that weapons would not be withheld from them because they have remedied their behaviors. U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders was on X and he commended student-led rallies against the war, saying, "I'm proud to see students protesting the war in Gaza. Stay peaceful and focused. You're on the right side of history." Blinken has said that advancing the aspirations of Palestinians is an important part of normalizing relationships with Saudi Arabia, and that this is important for Israel and regional security and for the isolation of Iran. And in the West Bank, the Israeli army conducted an operation on a town called Deir al-Ghashan near Tulkarem, and it destroyed a house where wanted individuals were suspected to be hiding. 5 wanted suspects were killed, and 1 turned themselves in. Their identities have not been released, and an Israeli police officer was also injured during the operation. I wanted to give a final update on the protests on campuses. According to reports, they've largely quieted down, in part because of negotiations with university officials, but also because of police intervention suspension. There's a question of if or how they might continue because many semesters are ending and summer is about to begin. President Biden gave his first substantial speech and rejected the idea of sending the National Guard to campuses, as some Republican lawmakers have called for. But in his comments on Thursday, he strongly condemned anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian rhetoric. The protests have, quote, put to the test two fundamental American principles, President Biden said. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld. He called for nonviolence and adherence to the law. So that is an update on what's happening. Thank you so much for your efforts. Continue. Do not give up hope. Continue to pursue peace, to call for a comprehensive ceasefire. We're so grateful for your continued work.